Playground.
Hooray!
This is the Deron Harris Podcast. Here's your host, Deron Harris.
Hey folks, what's up? How you doing? Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Deron Harris. This is the Deron Harris program. How are you this week? Hopefully you're doing good this week. Hopefully you're doing good today. Listen, I got a guest today that might help you out. If you know me, I like to ask right up front every week, how's your mental state of being? Well, my guest today is Peter Vox. Peter Vox is the author of a book called The Psych Ward Notes, Surviving Depression and Anxiety. And basically what it is his memoirs about the time that he spent in a psychiatric institution. So I'm very excited to be speaking with Peter because I myself suffer from depression and anxiety and have spent some time in a psychiatric facility. So anyone who has had these issues, I encourage you to stick around and listen to this podcast. So I'm going to take a quick, fast break. And when I come back, we're going to get on with Peter Vox. This is Deron Harris Podcast. Be right back.
Look for Starbucks coffee in a grocery store near you, then sit back and enjoy the exceptional taste of Starbucks at home.
Now, back to the Deron Harris Podcast.
Hey folks, welcome back to the podcast. I'm joined now by my guest today, Peter Vox. He has written a book called The Psych Ward Notes, Surviving Depression and Anxiety. What's up, man? Thanks for joining me. What's going on?
How are you? Nice to meet you. How are you today?
I'm doing great, man. I'm doing a lot better lately. As I'm excited to have you on because I suffer from depression and anxiety myself. A couple of years ago, I was diagnosed with MDD, major depressive disorder and anxiety.
Sure.
And
okay,
I'm currently going through treatment right now. I'm in therapy right now, and I'm dealing okay. I use my podcast as, I guess, kind of talk therapy. So I'm very excited to have you on and kind of talk to you about some of the things that you've been through. So your book is called The Psych Ward Notes, Surviving Depression and Anxiety. My first question is, why that title?
Well, if I had to do it over again, I would call it The Psych Ward Notes, Living with Anxiety and Depression. So I would call it living with it because, surviving sort of sounds like I've conquered it, but it's a lifelong thing, and it's something that you have to learn to live with and manage. And I actually have MDD as well, so
really?
It's a tough one. Yeah, it's a tough one it's tough to be in that spot.
It's very difficult sometimes. Can you tell me about August 21st, 2019?
Sure. That was when I got committed to Jacoby Hospital in the Bronx. I started an 11-month hospitalization at 3 different psychiatric facilities. I was having, I was taking a lot of antidepressants at once, prescribed by doctors. I was on 2 benzodiazepines. I was on Ativan and Klonopin. So with all that combination, it gives you suicidal ideation. When a benzo wears off, you have suicidal ideation. And what happens if you don't understand that, you start taking more of them. And I had 1 or 2 days of abusing them. And at a certain point, I had enough, and I went into this mode of not wanting to live anymore. And I just took a big handful of Ativan, and I laid down, and I didn't care if I never woke up.
Wow.
And so when I woke up. I woke up in Jacoby in different clothes. They had me in my hospital pajamas, and
Sure.
This is the 5th time I was committed. So
Sure.
At that point, I knew I was going to be in there for a while, and I wasn't going to fight it. And I said, it's time to really take care of this, because it's been going on since 1978, since I'm 9 years old.
Sure. back. I mean, it's been several. It's been a long time now, but I spent some time, like a few days, in a psychiatric ward in Queens, in Roosevelt,
Okay.
in Queens. For they had me straight Hannibal Lectered out. They had me. I mean, it
Uh-huh.
was it was a bad scene. I've had some issues with my son's mothers for years, so it's been, it's been a lot that's been on me. And then there was one day I was having a really bad day, and I had locked myself in the room, and my girlfriend at the time had called my mother. My mother had called the cops, and it was like 9 cops in my apartment, like 11 cops in my apartment. I'm standing there smoking a cigarette, and it was like, they're sitting there going, "Hey, buddy, you're all right?" I'm like, "Yeah, not really, but I was getting ready. They were letting me finish my cigarette, really. So I finished my
Uh,
cigarette, and then they rushed me and they took me downstairs and put me in the ambulance and drove me to the hospital. And
sure.
I spent a few, and I couldn't, at that time, I didn't know what was really going on. I just was very angry. I didn't, I couldn't sleep. I didn't remember much. I was very erratic. I didn't want to hear anything. I couldn't listen to anybody. I couldn't even listen to myself, and I couldn't slow down. And I just wanted to eat through steel. Everything, and I
Mhm.
couldn't figure out how to make it stop. I was hysterical. I cried. I was leaking through my face, and I just couldn't
Sure.
make it stop. So I ended up going to the hospital. Now, not too long ago, I guess about a year, I've been a little bit over a year. I had another, well, I had another severe breakdown. I spent some time in the University of Florida psychiatric ward here
Okay.
well, just down the street from here. But a couple of years ago, I had a job. I had to go to the doctor for something, and my primary care physician, he just gave me a questionnaire, and I filled it out. And in my next visit with him, he just asked me a few questions, and he informed me of my diagnosis. And I
Mhm.
wanted to know, when were you diagnosed with your condition?
I was first diagnosed in 1984. I was 14. I was having trouble. I always had trouble acclimating to new phases in life. And I saw my friends and classmates acclimating to high school, and I grew up on Long Island, and in a nice town, and um, with students that were driven, they want to go to college, and I was just floundering. And I knew that something was wrong, because of a lot of losses of relatives and
Sure.
friends of our family. At people died at a young age. A good handful of people. And so that was my first awareness of life was death and going to cemeteries and things of that nature. So I would immediately, when things would go wrong or if I failed at something, I would immediately obsess about death and having the fear of it.
Sure.
And it hit me at 9 years old, and it would happen every so often. And then just by 14, it was full blown, and it was all day, every day, and it's horrible. So I asked my parents to go to therapy, and they sent me. And I was first diagnosed with a generalized anxiety disorder, so they call it GAD. And then when I started a second therapist when I was about 26, it was generalized anxiety disorder with major depressive disorder.
Sure. Sure. Well,
So
that's,
yeah, so usually with one feeds off the other. So if you're anxious, you're going to get depressed that you're anxious. If you're depressed, you're going to get anxious because you're depressed. So they usually go hand in hand.
okay. I'm really myself. I'm learning about it myself, and like you, it was I, wa- I was it was I was pretty young when I started. I actually started to see. I was a military kid because my parents split up. My mom married a guy in the Navy, and then moved out to California. So I
Okay.
was back and forth, back and forth. I've never been in any school longer than 2 years, and
Wow.
so I would have to fly back and forth between, Florida, New York, New Jersey, and California. So when I was in
Mm.
California, my mother noticed that I was having some problems, and decided that she would take me to see some therapists, and I ended up seeing Dr. Paxton and Dr. Kleckner. I'll never forget them. They were great dudes, and I mean, it got to the point where I really enjoyed going. I enjoyed going to therapy because it really kind of that was my first experience, and I was in the, I mean, what was that? That was like the ninth grade, eighth grade. I mean, yeah, like the eighth
Sure.
grade. So it was my first experience realizing that, I might have an issue, and
Mhm.
I wanted to, if I can get back on track, can you share a little bit about your personal journey with mental illness and how it inspired you to write your book?
So it was during the 11-month hospitalization. So it was the fifth time I was hospitalized. I did a total of about 14 months. So there was one particular Friday, the psychologist said, I was obviously very down, and I wasn't doing anything, just sitting heavily medicated, uh, and sitting in the TV room, just looking like a zombie. And she said, here's a notebook, write a paragraph for Friday, write a paragraph for Saturday, and write a paragraph for Sunday, and then 3 paragraphs, 5 sentences each, and we'll go over it Monday. Write about anything you want. So Monday came around, I handed her the notebook, and I wound up writing 66 pages. So that led to, all right, I'm going to keep a journal and talk about my history of when I was a kid and all the relatives and friends that passed away, how that affected me, how schizophrenia ran in my family. And I didn't find that out till I was 50, when I was in the hospital, and they offered me ECT treatment, which is electroshock treatment.
Right.
And then when I told my parents, my dad was still alive at the time, and my mother said, "Oh, your uncle had, shock therapy." I said, "Why?" "Well, he had schizophrenia." So, and this was the first time I was finding this out. So that was a shock, no pun intended. Well, pun
Right.
intended. And then and it turns out, and then my grandmother had shock treatment too. And I said, "Well, why did she have it?" And because that uncle that had the shock treatment, he passed away.
Wow.
So supposedly she wasn't doing well. But then I look back on her behavior, and thinking about it, she was definitely undiagnosed of having schizophrenia. And so after that, I started realizing, well, this is partly genetic. Um, and then you have my father's depression and anxiety, hypochondria, um, constantly reminding the family of everything in the world that's to be afraid of, ingredients in food, everything that causes cancer, whether it's food or standing too close to the microwave oven or sitting too close to the TV. Um, we didn't have a color TV till 1982, and it was it wasn't that we couldn't afford one. It was just my father was scared of them. And don't drink the apple juice, it has pesticide. And we can't have regular toothpaste, Crest or Aim, because it has all these ingredients that cause cancer. So when you're 6 7 years old and you're hearing about all these things, it's being ingrained.
Sure.
So that's part of it. And then my brother rebelled against it, against my father. So there was that part of it. And then he was, if you ever saw the movie Weird Science, the older brother, Chet, see, my brother was like Chet, constantly picking on, constantly being picked on and slapped around, not beat up seriously, but slapped around to where it was very humiliating all the time. Being called a faggot, and you're a woman, you're a pussy, all these things.
Right.
And that adds up. But the thing about my brother is he's 5 years older, and he's had the same losses that I had, with same family members, obviously, same family friends, same father, same household, and he's fine. There's nothing going on there with him in terms of anxiety or depression. So you start to realize that there's a genetic factor too that's going on. And the other thing that happened was when I had my first girlfriend, and she was the first person I was having sex with, and every time before I would go see her, I would throw up. I would have a full blown panic attack, and I would throw up. And I started realizing, I'm like, this is this is a chemical issue as well. There's something happening, and you start to look back, on your childhood. And I realized I was having panic attacks at 5 years old, going to kindergarten and nursery school, being afraid to leave the house,
Wow.
and remembering those feelings, and those being, anxiety, and which leads to depression. So in the journal, I cover all those aspects. I cover what happened with my teaching job, marriage, uh, my experience with music, how that helps, and there's funny stories as well. And once I got bored with writing about myself, I started writing about what life is like living in a psychiatric hospital, and
Right.
what the other patients were like, because
Hmm.
it became very interesting. I wanted to know um, how someone with schizophrenia feels. What do you hear? What do you see? Um, and it's intriguing. And the two people that gave me the most information, um, that they had the same experiences. What happened was they wound up attacking their families with a knife,
Wow.
and stabbing them, and luckily nobody died in both their families, but they would hear voices. And one guy said to me, he says, the voices sound as real as you standing here. And it's not my voice, it's voices that I don't know. And sometimes they
Wow.
argue, and sometimes they yell. And he says it gets so loud that it actually hurts my eardrums. It gets so loud.
Wow.
And some people hallucinate. I've met people that, see, bugs on the wall, or, people that don't exist, or uh, if a chair is against the wall, the chair is like melting into the wall, sort of being like on a permanent acid trip,
Right. Right.
which I never took, because I was always afraid to try, drugs like that. I said, I'm already on a trip, I don't
I'm
want it to be
tripping
worse.
already.
I'm tripping already. So, uh, I write about I've tried over 23 medications. I talk about the side effects, my opinions about, whether, um, the hospitals want to keep you sick. Are they really interested in helping you, or keeping you as a steady customer on the drugs, and for the insurance companies.
Well,
And also, like I said, what everyday life is like there.
see, I take two medication. Actually, I take three medication. I take one for sleep, but I don't.
Mhm.
That was one of the things with me. I don't take a lot of the medications. I take Wellbutrin,
Yeah,
and
no, no.
I take guanfacine to help me focus. Now I take
Mhm.
those two because that's as deep as I want to go because of what you said. Because I don't want to be, like you said, a steady customer, and I
Yeah,
do want to get back to a life where I don't need medication. So, and I was an athlete, and then I don't want to I don't want to do anything to myself where I cannot participate, but I have some back issues anyway. But that's beside the point. But I don't want to. I don't want to be, and this is one thing I really made very clear to my doctor. I don't want to be medicated, heavily medicated to where I'm sedated, and I don't want to appear medicated. I want to talk through my problems. I want to be able to
sure.
get them out. I want to talk to someone about them, which really kind of leads me into my next question, which is what motivated you to be so open about your experiences about depression and anxiety in your book?
Um, there's two parts to it. One was, uh, I was open with it when I started therapy. Um, there was so much on my mind that I needed to tell somebody. And the other part was being a fan of the Howard Stern show, and listening to how open he was with his neuroses, and just every facet of his life, and how many times he was going to therapy a week, 3 times a week at one point. And I sort of fashioned the book after Howard Stern, and just being very open about everything. I said, well, I might as well say everything. I'm in a psychiatric hospital. What do I have to lose at this point?
Awesome.
Just might as well say everything. and the structure of the book is sort of modeled after the movie Pulp Fiction in terms of there's flashbacks, and you're going back and forth with different stories while it making sense to the reader, so they can keep track of what's going on.
Sure.
And there's also parts where uh, I kept it word for word with the journal, and there's parts in the journal that I'm just ruminating, saying the same things over and over again. And I kept them in there. And before those parts, I write in bold text. I'm like, rumination warning. This is going to be, this. If you want to experience what this circular thinking is like, then that's what these parts are about. But and if you don't want to read that part, because it can get annoying, or like, all right, he said this in chapter 2 already. So there obviously it's an option to skip those parts but if you want to get into the mind of what circular thinking is, and rumination, and not being able to move on from certain events in your life, and just really getting down on yourself,
I
and
struggle with that.
punishing yourself. Yeah, punishing yourself emotionally. You're convincing yourself that you're a failure, you're a loser, all of these things, and it's sort of a defense mechanism. You do it to yourself before anybody else can do it to you. And if someone does say, "Oh, you're a loser, you failed," and you're like, "Well, I already knew that. Tell me something I don't know." So it's sort of preparing for things that most probably won't happen to you,
Right.
and you stay hyper vigilant on that.
So, could you highlight a turning point in your mental health journey that shaped the narrative, that made you that what was the defining moment when you were like, you know what, enough is enough. I'm gonna take myself back.
The day I got committed for the 11 months, I said, that's it. I have 3 sons.
Wow.
I could have overdosed on Ativan, who knows, but with that, I took maybe between 15 and 20, and, I was 50 years old, and you don't know what it's going to do to you. And one of the nurses said to me, you have 3 sons to live for. And that's why, I'm learning to live with it or survive it. And for my sons, I'm never going to, try anything that rash again. And what really cemented it was I was doing some volunteer work with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and they have a walk every year. And I was a volunteer on the staff, and just seeing all these people that are walking in someone's memory, a couple thousand people, and it hits you because everybody's telling their story, their personal story about how they tried to, commit suicide, or they lost a child or their parent. And that was an additional aspect where I felt, you know what, my sons are never going to have to participate in this in my memory, and nobody that I know is going to have to participate in this in my memory. So no matter how bad there's ups and downs, but no matter how bad things can get, I still remember, you got to take care of yourself as a human being first. You get up, you brush your teeth, you bathe, you got to eat. That's when you're at your lowest. You can barely function. And yet, when it's time to get my kids from school, I can do it. Something turns on. You got to be there for your kids.
Right.
Drive your kids to school, pick them up from school. I'm divorced as well, so it's I have them every afternoon. So I see him every Sunday. So I see him quite a bit. I see him 6 days a week. So that keeps you going. And the other things are that you really have to force yourself to find things to get your mind to think in a different direction. That's sort of cognitive behavioral therapy,
Sure.
where it's something as simple as going for a walk. Like if nothing else, go for a walk outside.
Change your state.
Just change your environment for 20 minutes, a half hour. Just get out of the house. I'm the same way as you. I like to exercise. I played sports when I was a kid. I drum. I'm a singer. So playing music. I'm a terrible guitarist, but good enough to sit in my living room and goof around.
Right.
So you really have to force yourself. You have to force yourself to do these things. And somehow, uh, when you're laying in bed and you don't want to get up, somehow I just get up. Something inside me goes, okay, it's time to get up and eat. It's time to get up and you better exercise today. And I try to remind myself, remember how good you looked in when you were in your 20s? Don't you want to have some resemblance of that? And uh, exercise for me is the meditation, because for me, meditation, I've tried it and I have trouble completely letting go because the thoughts are racing all the time, and
Absolutely. I
it
know
gets
exactly what you mean.
frustrating. Yeah, it gets frustrating. So a friend of mine, she goes to the gym at 4 o'clock every morning, and she rides, the stationary bike, and she goes hard on. She goes hard on it, for an hour, and she's sweating, and that's her zen. So um, you don't have to sit and try to quiet your mind, and the deep breathing. And while deep breathing does help, sometimes these things don't work for everybody. And
Right.
um, what I tell people is that there's lots of different options. You have to find what works for you. Sometimes I draw abstract pictures with, with charcoal pencils, colored pencils. So there's some art there. And just, if nothing, like I said, going for a walk, with some music on that you like.
I
And that's how I cope.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, it's okay.
I've found some things that help me. I produce music also, but I'm a
Okay.
photographer, I'm a comedian, I'm a baker. I do a wide variety of
Mm.
things to kind of change my state when I get to something or something that this repetitiously plays over and over again. And that's all the time. I have a lot of things going up here, a lot, but you had said something before that I wanted to ask you. You said that you had gone through a divorce, and I wanted to ask you, did you have a support system while you were going through your challenges?
I was in therapy at the time. Some friends were supportive, and some were, you just got to move on and get over it. And that's really no help because they don't understand the existing problems.
Did they
Some
think?
friends didn't believe that.
I was going to say, did they
Oh, go
think
ahead.
that you were? Did they think that you were faking it, or did they not believe you, or?
Not that I was faking it. They didn't believe that it was as bad as it really is, because you spend all day putting up this facade that you're okay. And the thing I do have is the creativity. I have a very good sense of humor. Um, I once I made a girl. I've made one girlfriend laugh so hard she peed in her pants. And then the friend that rides the bicycle every morning, I made her laugh so hard that she passed out. So there's the sense.
That's
She
awesome.
actually passed out and banged her head. So uh so they were very surprised. The forward of my book is written by a guitar player that I'm still friends with, and I was in a band with him when I was in college. And he said basically in the forward, I would have, when I met him, he looked every bit of a rock star, the life of the party, funny, outgoing, and never would I have imagined that he would be in a psychiatric facility. And that's what it's usually like. That people think, "Well, really, that
Absolutely.
you have this." And after I wrote the book, my first college roommate was very upset with me because he thought it wasn't true, because his sister had committed suicide and his father just was so depressed he just let himself get sick and and passed away.
Right.
And it took one of my oldest friends to have a lunch with him one day, and my name came up, and he told me, he said, Peter really has this. I've known him since we're 5 years old. He's not faking. And so, but after the divorce, there were a couple of friends that were very helpful. My therapist was very helpful, and it was, yeah, it was, it was work colleagues. It was two work colleagues. I called them friends, and some other friends that other friends that had anxiety and depression. And one friend in particular who had it almost as bad as I did.
Sure.
Um, so he understood what I was going through, and then other people that I knew were getting divorced, and that was the other thing, that was helpful.
Right. Um,
But but people do disappear when you get divorced. People disappear on you.
oh, that's like any breakup. You break up with somebody, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden, these were our friends, and no longer are they your friends. That's happened. I've lost some good friends, but I've also made some good friends that way.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, in
I,
my case, I wasn't friends with her friends. It was just the friends that I had
oh, it
just
was
sort
your
of
friends.
disappeared, and they weren't friends with her either.
Wow.
So it was just all of a sudden they were just gone, you know.
Okay.
So it was a strange situation. And then, when you go into a situation like that, having major depressive disorder and anxiety disorder, it makes it tenfold.
Right.
The normal, people, was it 70% of people get divorced, and so a person that is lucky enough to not have these issues, when they go through these things, I think they go through a normal level of depression and anxiety, and they're able to move on. But for someone like me, it really takes a toll on you,
Right. I
and
get that.
it adds to, yeah, it was part of a 6 year period where a lot of things happened at once. I was pushed out of my job. I was in a car accident where I got T-boned, and I eventually got back surgery. The divorce, my father died. Um, in the divorce, I lost. You lose everything. So your finances are gone, and I had to declare Chapter 7, and with all those things, it came to a head, and then you're fighting these thoughts all day, and it's people call it a nervous breakdown. You snap, and that's when I snapped. I took all the Ativan, and ended up 11 months.
Um, Now I watched something on YouTube called Stand Up and Speak, and I watched it twice, and I thought it was great. And I wanted to know because I'm a comedian, I speak publicly, and I wanted to know what was that like for you to get up and address your issues in front of a room full of people, and how was that received by them?
Talking about the subject matter wasn't difficult at all. I've, being a singer, I have experience on stage,
Right.
um, emceeing a show and things like that. The difficult part was, we had to memorize the entire speech, no teleprompter, no notes. So it had to be completely memorized, and that was the intimidating part, and that caused anxiety. But
I was gonna say.
standing there, once I started doing the speech and I had it memorized, once I started doing it and I was a few sentences in, something hit me and I was on a roll, and it felt really good to talk about it, and uh, it was exhilarating. After I was done, I had this, you know, I'm sure you get it when after you have a good set of doing comedy, when you get off stage, there's this buzzing feeling like it's I guess it's, dopamine pulsing through your veins, and you sort of don't want it to stop.
Absolutely.
And I felt great, and it was well received. A lot of people came up to me afterward. One guy was crying because his son goes through it, and he was, crying for his son, and he was also crying about that he finally heard from someone that could put into words what his son couldn't. His son's a teenager, and it's
That's
hard to
great.
explain, or you don't, or you're afraid to open up that way, at that age. But having so many years of therapy and talking about it so much that I was excited to do it. The memorization was the tough part, but I enjoyed doing it.
Well, you did a great job. I think it was awesome. Like I said, I watched it twice and I really got a lot out of it. I got a few minutes left. So I got a
Okay.
couple of questions, couple more questions. And yeah, we definitely should sit down and do this again. I definitely enjoyed talking to you, but I wanted to ask you, what impact do you hope that your book will have on the readers, especially those dealing with mental challenges?
That it's not a book where I'm guaranteeing people, follow these 12 steps and you're never going to be depressed again. It's a realistic book. That someone's texting. So it's a realistic book where, um, if you have anxiety, depression, bipolar, PTSD, you're going to have good days and you're going to have bad days. You may have a good month, you may have a bad month, and that's life, and it's going to happen. And that the progress that you make, um, if you do have a bad a bad spell in a couple of weeks, it doesn't erase all the progress that you made, because when you fall into a depression again, if you do, and hopefully people don't, but if you do, you feel like, oh my God, I got to start all over again. And it's important to realize and it takes work to think about what you've accomplished and remind yourself of what you've accomplished. And friends, my friend JC in Florida, she reminds me all the time, look at everything you accomplished. Um, and I go, yeah, you're right,
Try to
and
keep yourself up on
so
it.
it's yeah. So it's important to realize that there's going to be ups and downs, and so there's like it's a self-help book, but it's not saying you follow these 10 steps and do what I did and I'm cured, and it's never going to happen to me again and I beat it. I think that's a bit unrealistic, and I talk about the different options like we spoke about. Find your way that's productive, that will help you get into a different mindset. And like I keep saying, just go for a walk, for 20 minutes. Find music that you love while you're listening to it. Being a comedian that you are, um, I listen to comedy. I'll go back, I'll watch Eddie Murphy Delirious, or Richard Pryor in the Sunset Strip, Dave Chappelle, Bill Burr, some of the newer guys. I'll listen to their podcasts, going to sleep. Um, and that puts you in a better state of mind when you hear someone talking about whatever subject matter it is that hits home for you. And a lot of those comedians do have depression and anxiety, and you can really understand or feel where they're coming from. And so I connect with them on those levels.
Very cool. One more question and then I gotta go. I got about a minute left. What makes you happy?
Sounds good. What makes me happy? Knowing that I'm doing a good job as a father, and knowing that my sons enjoy my company, and being on stage playing music, um, having a good workout, and when I accomplish something like the speech, uh, feeling that buzz of accomplishment. And for some people, I read this somewhere. Sometimes a big accomplishment is, I got out of bed and I brushed my teeth and I cleaned my apartment. And if that's what they're capable of doing that day, and they had spent weeks in bed, and all of a sudden they got up and took care of themselves, then that's a big accomplishment. Because the other thing that I want people to know that don't have it, that see people laying in bed all day, they're not having a good time. It's not laziness. They don't want to be there.
Hi, I'm Dave. I was once a scroll troll, lost in countless amounts of social media videos, feeling triggered by other people's feelings and opinions about topics I would enjoy. I would lash out and give feedback every time. To feel so attached to what others were saying was dangerous for my mental health. Choosing to leave social media and my connected devices for a day gave me a perfect detox and allowed me to become more set in reality. No more stressing over comments, just relaxation knowing that I cannot let others' opinions bother me, giving me a sense of protection from the negativity. I feel like I've strengthened my mentality. So if you ever feel the pressure of social media controlling your emotions, remember, you have a choice to put the device down and pick up life.
All right, folks, that was Peter Vox, man. That was awesome. I really, really do appreciate you stopping by, Peter. You definitely have to come by again. I really enjoyed our conversation. Listen, folks, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up for the day, and I hope that you enjoyed this conversation. And if you did enjoy this conversation, please come on by. Stop back by the Deron Harris podcast. I'm here always talking about some sort of mental health issue because that's what I do here. So, again, I want to thank everybody for joining me. I want to thank my parents for being the absolute best parents in the world and giving me life. I want to thank my wife for being the sexiest thing I've ever seen in my life and the greatest support system in all of existence. I want to thank my producer and my best friend, Jesse Yandel, for putting me up to this every single week and making sure that he holds my face to the flame. So, and I want to thank Gentry Thomas for giving me the platform to reach out to you guys, which really means a lot to me. So until next week, I'm Deron Harris. This is the Deron Harris program. I'll see you guys later. Peace.